Well, Happy New Year, worship leaders. Thanks for joining me for this first episode in 2021. I'm so excited for what is to come this year, for us to grow together as leaders and as worshipers. Today's conversation is with my good friend, Kurtis Parks. Kurtis is the lead pastor of Bridges Nashville, which is a house church movement in Nashville, Tennessee. Before that, he was the worship director at National Community Church in Washington, D.C., where he led a team of over 100 musicians across 7 campuses. Today, we're going to talk about excellence. So we get into things like auditions, song banks, leading with a pastoral heart, all sorts of content. I'm so looking forward to it. It's so good. I know you're going to grow from it. So without delaying it any further, here's my conversation with Kurtis Parks. Well, Kurtis, man, with this conversation about excellence, can we start with just like a kind of a definition of excellence for our listeners, and maybe why it's important for worship leaders and worship teams to be excellent in their craft and what they do?
Yeah, what a great topic. I mean, I think everybody, no matter what your context, you want to be excellent at what you do. I mean, part of it is just, it's funner when you're not awful at something. So, but I think, when it comes to leading worship and when it comes to especially the music side of worship, excellence is so important because, excellence is the language of our culture. Mm-hmm. Like if you watch NBC, any production that they do, people didn't get there by being halfway at their job. Right. If you listen to the radio, the producers, the musicians, the artists, the songwriters didn't get to where they were by taking it lightly. And with anything in life, really, obviously the word excel comes from excellence. So people that excel in their craft or whatever they do, they get there because of excellence. And so when we look in the scriptures, we kind of see almost the same sort of thing in leadership. I mean, when you look at the way that Abraham led his tribe, he had hundreds of people following him, and he was a very wealthy guy. Mm-hmm. So he had something figured out. Then you have Moses, who led over 1 million Israelites out of Egypt through the Red Sea and the desert for 40 years. That takes some excellent leadership. Mm-hmm. And then you have these battles. And from Joshua to all of the warriors that we see down to the judges and the kings and even the prophets, the way that they communicated, the gospel writers, everyone was excellent at what they did. That's why we have this story of the Bible thousands of years later, because of excellent historians and excellent care taken for these important books of the Bible. And so it's just important to bring what we have to the table. And, we heard this all the time in our time at National Community, but excellence honors God and God honors excellence. And so I think when we can bring that sort of mentality, and obviously we're worshiping a king, not just a king, but the King of Kings. And so excellence is just so important. For a definition of it, I was actually sitting in a room, this is maybe 8 years ago. Hillsong came to Baltimore, and so I went up there to see them. And before they played their night of worship, there was about 30 or 40 worship leaders they invited in to just kind of have a sit-down chat with, guys like Jad Gillies and Marty and Reuben Morgan, a couple of their songwriters. And Jad gave a definition of excellence that has kind of stuck with me through the years. He said, excellence it's not perfection, it's just your very best. So I think a lot of us get caught in this perfectionism mindset where, we need everything to be flawless. And so one of two things can happen. You can either always wait for that completely fine-tuned product and never release it. Right. Or you can release it and always start second guessing yourselves. Right. When I say release, I'm not just talking about, an album or a book or anything like that, but I'm talking about, going out and leading a team and you're always holding back because you're afraid of not hitting perfection, or you're always trying to almost like a taskmaster, getting something out of your team. That worship wasn't meant to be done in stress. So I think the definition for maybe a baseline today could just be, it's not perfection, it's just your very best. Yeah. And so you have to define that in every context. What is your very best? And over here in Nebraska, what is your very best? And over here in Guatemala, what is your very best? And bring that to the Lord. Yeah.
Right. Man, that's good. I was found it funny in Nashville, leading in different places, how many artists you'd have come in that, they'd be like, well, this is for the church. This is for the Lord. It's okay. Like we don't have to be as good for this. I'm like, man, you would never do that for the club show that you did.
Right.
You're always going to be excellent in front of a producer. You're always going to be excellent. But when it comes to the church, you don't really care. Yeah, it's an interesting kind of thing that people get into, I think. But where can we start with this kind of pursuit of excellence? We have worship leaders listening who are, they're leading. Some of them are leading by themselves. Some of them are leading, small, more acoustic driven teams. It's them and a cajon. Some are full band. Some are, they have multiple teams that they get to rotate in and out. So all sorts of different contexts, and all of them want to hit that, excellent target. Where can they start? Being in different contexts, how can they define excellence for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing is to know you can start wherever you are, and start with where you are. Don't wait and put it off months in advance. Don't think you have to have X, Y, and Z on your team in order to hit excellence. I think it's so interesting. I'm a huge fan of artists that just do it simple, but they're amazing. So really, ever since I was 13, I've had a phrase that's kind of been in front of my eyes, whether it comes to music, producing, writing, whatever. It's simplicity meets excellence. I love that phrase, and I think anyone can take that. So that's when we see an artist like Ed Sheeran, and it's just him and an acoustic guitar, but he's got a stadium packed of people because he's bringing the sauce, Or we've got, just two people on stage like the band The Civil Wars or Johnny Swim, or, take a myriad of any folk artist. It's just usually a guy and a girl. It could be an acoustic or a piano, but it sounds amazing. They've worked out the harmonies. They've worked out the parts, and everything is just clicking. So it start with where you are. If you're by yourself with an acoustic guitar, don't think that, it's just me and I know these songs and I can get to, sound check 5 minutes late, plug in the guitar and just start going. No, you still need to warm up your voice. You still need to learn the right chords. You still need to bring your A game and bring a sound of excellence. If you have, one or two other people on your team, maybe that's a percussion or a piano player. Excellence is finding the right gel for those instruments. So for instance, if you have just an acoustic and a piano player, those can really complement each other and it can sound amazing. Yeah. Or they can really fight each other and the piano lines are walking all over the vocals, and the acoustic is, thinking through sonic range. You've got low, mids, and highs. If you both acoustic and piano are both mid-range instruments naturally. So, one thing that you could do is, think about how to balance it. So maybe the acoustic is capoed high and the piano's riding kind of low. Then you have, different sonic ranges, even with just two instruments. Yeah. But I think it's, start with where you are and don't think that you have to wait till a certain point or a certain size to hit excellence. One of the things that I've learned in this church planting journey, and walking alongside me for so long, is that you don't have to let your size limit your vision. Right. Even as a church of, we're less than 100 people. We've always been less than 100 people. Right. But we've released amazing music and videos.
True. We had 101 on an Easter Sunday.
Hey, that's right.
That's right.
And then when you count the Holy Spirit, Jesus, and the Father.
Right. In that pregnant woman.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
Yeah.
And did she have twins?
She might have.
She could have.
Yeah.
We count everything we can.
That's right. That's right.
But we've always been a smaller church. But even as we've recognized that, it's like, man, look who God's put in the room, and we've just tried to find the right synergy with, people that are producing, people that are video guys, people that are songwriters. I think you got to start with where you are and then grow from there. You know? Like, think about building a house. you got to start with a foundation. You don't start with a roof. You hope to one day finish it with the roof. So maybe your roof is a lead guitar player,
Right.
But I wouldn't start with just a lead guitar player because that could sound kind of weird.
Right. Well, how can we go about attracting, those solid musicians, those excellent musicians? Maybe, we've begun to establish a baseline, kind of know, okay, this is, what I'm aiming for. We're getting pretty excellent with our, acoustic cajon and keyboard, and we want to add in, a bass player or, a drummer or whatever. How can we attract those excellent musicians, solid musicians, rather than, Sally, who, is going to sing out of tune, but she's been at the church for 100 years and she's a sweetheart, how can we attract those people?
Yeah, it's interesting. You're going to always have people in your church that will surprise you either way, right? But more than likely, you've got somebody in your church, maybe it's a teenager who's had a MacBook for 5 years and they're so incredible making beats that, but they haven't told anybody.
Right.
Or you've got somebody who, I tried out for The Voice and I they didn't say that they didn't make it, but they said they tried out.
Okay.
So usually it's the people that promote themselves that you always have to question,
right.
What's really going on here? But I found that excellence attracts excellence. So the first thing is have something worth coming out for.
Yeah.
Because great musicians will come out for something that they want to invest their time and their talent into.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We had thousands of people at National Community Church, but when I first took over as a worship pastor, not all of our campuses had enough people to field a full band. And so we really worked on our sound. We worked on our craft. We started implementing rehearsals and we started writing songs and getting people excited about what we were doing, putting out albums and videos. And the next audition that we held, which we'll talk about that, I'm sure, in a little bit.
Yeah.
But the next audition we held, we had 50 people come out.
Yeah. Wow.
And of those 50, I think we had probably 30, 35 people make it through, whether it was vocalists or instrumentalists. Yeah. But I'll never forget this guy, Wes. In all of our time at National, Wes was one of the best guitarists I've ever played with, in my life. He sounded like John Mayer. I mean, his tone, his skill. And he had moved up from Atlanta and he had played at a bunch of churches down there. And if you know Atlanta, it's the Mecca for great worship musicians. Right. But Wes had come up to DC and he auditioned and I said, how long have you been coming to this church? And he said, man, I've been here for 2 years. And I was like, what? I said, how are we just now hearing about you? And he said, well, I finally heard something I thought I'd plug into,
Wow.
And so it was just eye-opening that you could have some incredible people in your seats and in your church. But if they don't see something worth, think about it. If you have a rehearsal every week and you got to show up early and stay late and I mean, you could be talking 8 to 10 hours a week for a musician, especially if multiple services, right?
Sure.
And we were all volunteer.
Right.
So, if you're going to volunteer your time and your talent, you really want to make sure that it's going towards something that people believe in and there's traction and movement towards a vision and a goal.
Yeah. That's good. Well, what should we be looking at kind of in the audition process? So we want to attract those musicians, and maybe we got some people saying, hey, yeah, I'd like to play. I'd like to show you what I've got, what should we be looking for? I mean, there's all sorts of ways to do auditions, but but what do we need to find? No matter the strategy of, it's just one-on-one or play with the whole band or whatever, what should we look for?
No, those are all good thoughts. I mean, there is no one way to do auditions. I mean, I've done them one-on-one and I've done them having somebody plug in with a full band. I've done them where there are, I have the vocals go to this room. I have the instrumentalists go to this room. But I think you have to find what works for you. My advice would be, have a few songs that kind of hit a range of different skill sets, So when we were doing auditions, we would try to do them 3 times a year, spring, summer, and fall. And we tried to pick songs that like one song would just be like a bass line, like, hey, if you can play chords, you should be good here. Then we had one song that was like, it could have been like a cornerstone piano line or something like that. So it's like, okay, this is pretty simple if you can play this lead line. And then we do some other stuff, maybe throw a Hillsong Young and Free and just see if they had any, skills on the synth or the lead guitar. Drums, obviously they need to be able to play to a click.
Right.
That's also defining it in your context, because if you are not using a click or you're not using multi-tracks, maybe you just need somebody that can hold down a good beat without going all over the place. If you have a choir in your church, a choir isn't going to be, they don't need to be Beyonce, but they need to be singing, harmony and have good tone,
right,
and good pitch.
Right.
And so I think it's, figuring out what your context is for excellence.
Yeah.
But when you're doing an audition, I would definitely recommend having a game plan with certain songs.
Yeah.
And having everybody play the same thing. So we would usually have, two songs that we'd send them pre-audition. Hey, here's this song by, whoever, this song by whoever. Learn the parts. That's important.
Yeah.
Because you want to make sure that they're going to put in the time and they're actually going to listen to the songs and show up prepared.
Right. Lay out the expectation.
Expectation and communication are the two biggest building blocks of anything. So, what's the expectation? Set that out. Hey, learn these parts. You're going to plug in with a band. So we'd have somebody show up and they would, I said, bring your in-ears. And, if they're a guitarist, hey, bring your gear. I want to see what you're going to be playing on Sunday. If they were a bass player, it's like, hey, we've got the amp. You don't need to bring that.
Sure.
So set that expectation. But I had a couple songs that they needed to come prepared, and then I would throw them a curveball.
Okay.
Because it's like, if all they did was spend 5 days prepping those two songs, it's like, of course they're going to play it well if they're a decent musician.
Sure.
But can they handle spontaneity, and can they handle more than what's just placed right in front of them?
Right.
I wouldn't put Beethoven in front of a piano player and say, hey, try to. But I think in the audition process, have a couple songs, set the expectation. And then here's a big thing that we don't talk about enough. I feel like my audio level it won't stay set.
I know. So you're all right.
I just, for the first time, am using this interface with this computer. So I don't know if it's kind of going haywire. Hopefully it's all right.
We should be okay.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I was about to say, make it fun. That's one thing. If I could go back and do some of those early auditions, I think the pressure for people, they just put it on themselves and they're like, I got to make this perfect. And we literally had people cry.
Oh, man.
Like in a church audition.
Right.
I'm like, look, I'm not Simon Cowell.
Right.
So I tried to make it really fun.
Yeah.
And I tried to, ease the tension. And so, we'd usually have a holding room where we'd have like 20 people, and we had, I'd have my assistant out there, and she would, hey guys, just tell us a little bit about yourself, and kind of start like a, round table discussion, just kind of ease people's, apprehension and stuff. And then when they came into the room with the band, I'd make it a party, like, what's up? What's your name? And just try to make them feel like, oh, this is okay. This is going to be good,
Yeah. We'll talk about song choice for a little bit. So we talked about musicians. Now, songs are important to that too. You don't want to match up some musicians with some other songs. Sometimes it doesn't work. So, there's always people that try to do songs that they can't quite pull off. So how can you choose songs that are right for your team in order to hit, that excellent target?
That's a great question. I always say, know what you can do on stage and kill it. Know what you can't do and work on it.
Yeah.
Off stage.
Yeah.
So whether it's, a guitar pedal and, your electric guitar shows up and, hey, I just bought this delay pedal and I'm going to give it a shot, Hey, not on Sunday morning,
Right.
Figure that out off stage in your room.
Right.
Also with songs, though, it's so good. Number one, you need to know what your church's culture is.
Yeah.
If you're a church that, really loves singing hymns, but all you're picking is Hillsong Young and Free, that's not going to connect.
Right.
And if it doesn't connect with your congregation, it's probably not going to connect with your team who came from your congregation.
Right.
You know? So know your culture when you're picking songs, and then know your level of musicianship, you know? I mean, obviously, like when you're listening to, you know, Israel Houghton or Planet Shakers or some of that stuff with, you know, Jonathan Stockstill and Martha Menezes, you know, there's some highly skilled musicians that are playing 64th notes and, you know, just crazy, you know, 8 key changes in a song, but it sounds good, you know.
Right.
It's not easy to pull off.
No. It's not easy to pull off one key chain and make it sound good.
Oh man, I was listening to like all these old Vineyard songs on my 13-hour drive last week.
Yes.
It took me back.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, know your church, know where you're at. And so when you're picking songs, I would usually use a song bank.
Yeah.
And that's a cool way to kind of, you know, reach excellence, because it's a song bank is essentially saying, hey, for the next, you know, 3 months, we're going to use these songs. So put it on a Spotify playlist and just listen to them and get them in your head, get them in your spirit. And, you know, let these songs almost be like second nature when you pick up your instrument. And obviously, like vocalists, you can be singing along with them in your car. And so, you know, I would usually pick, you know, 25 to 40 songs for a 3-month stretch. And that's an easy way to hit excellence, because especially if you're not able to do audition or rehearsals every week.
Right.
Your musicians know, okay, you know, we're going to probably pick something from this bank.
Right.
And that's an easy way to do songs. And the cool thing is you can take the sermon series that you're doing, or you can connect with the lead pastor or whoever's on the teaching team and say, hey, you know, what are the messages that you're going to be leaning into for this next month or two? And how can we pick songs that correlate to the message, that reiterate the themes, that really get into our people's hearts? What do our people need to be singing right now? Yeah. And, you know, I think also don't be afraid to pick songs that you just love. Yeah. You know, if you're the worship leader, you don't want to be picking songs that you just hate. You know, like one thing that I've learned, especially this year as a lead pastor, is don't be afraid to pastor how God's wired you. You know, I think we see, you know, certain leaders that we look up to and we want to emulate them or we want to imitate them. And it'll just make you miserable. So, you know, if you just only do what you think people want you to do, or, you know, what you see being done, but it doesn't resonate with your heart, you're in a leadership position for a reason. So don't be afraid to, hey, I really love this song. It's connected with me. Let's try to lead it this Sunday, you know? So hopefully, you know, between the song bank, knowing your church's culture, and then knowing what you like, you'll be able to find some songs that everybody can really get on board with and hit that excellent mark. Yeah, that's really good. It's really good. I know we have just a couple minutes left here, so let's kind of circle back to the very beginning of the conversation again, when we were talking about why excellence matters. You know, it's not just to sound good or to put on a great show, but you know, we're bringing an offering to the King, right? You know, we're coming before, you know, Jesus enthroned in the highest heaven, right? So, how do we keep that top of mind? You know, as we're auditioning people, as we're putting together song banks, as we're doing kind of the work side rather than the fun side of leading worship, like how do we keep that in front of us, that, you know, this is what it's about. It's not just about sounding good, although we want to sound good. Like that's a big part of it. How do we keep that, you know, it's all for Jesus in front of us? I mean, that's everything, right? If we're doing it for any other motivation than to honor Jesus, we have to take a step back. And I just wanted to share a couple scriptures as you were speaking. It kind of brought to mind a couple really great points in the Old Testament. Like first off, Psalm 78, 72, one of my favorite scriptures. And I think this will help us not just reach excellence in our skill, but also with our hearts. Listen to this. And David shepherded them with integrity of heart, and with skillful hands he led them. That's Psalm 78, verse 72. And so one of the things that made David a great leader was that he didn't just leave it to the skill of his hands. but he also brought integrity of heart.
Yeah.
And I think when you're talking about how do we keep it all about Jesus, how do we keep the motivation, the main thing, it's got to be integrity of heart. Yeah. You know, you have to continuously be in the word of God. You have to continuously be worshiping off stage and not just on stage.
Yeah.
You need to live the life that only God sees.
Yeah.
And honestly, like that's worship. You know, when you're spending time in prayer and spending time in the word and worshiping God when you don't have a microphone in front of you, I think that's when it makes it authentic and real. And that's what will keep your motivation pure.
Yeah.
Because straightly, God is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him.
Yeah.
And so when you're seeking him in the quiet place, I think the worship in the public sphere will not only be authentic, but I think it'll hit another level of excellence.
Yeah.
Because you're bringing that integrity of heart and skillful hand. And then one other passage, and I love to quote this anytime I'm talking to worship leaders. This is from Moses, who you wouldn't really think as a worship leader, but he actually wrote one of the first songs recorded in scripture.
Right.
Exodus 15. And it's my son Moses' life verse.
Nice.
Funny story about that, but maybe that's for another time.
Oh, yeah.
But here's what Moses wrote to the tribe of Levi. You know, he had 12 tribes that he was overseeing. The Levites were kind of like the early church staff. Mm-hmm. And here's what it says in Deuteronomy 10, verse 8. At that time, the Lord set apart the tribe of Levi to carry the Ark of the Covenant, to stand before the Lord to minister, and to pronounce blessings in his name, as they still do today. So there's like this 3-part calling for the Levites who, you could look at as early worship leaders, really.
Right.
And these 3 things are to carry the ark, which represented his presence. So carry the presence of God, minister to the Lord. Mm-hmm. That's a big one. Because we can get so busy, rehearsing, getting the lyrics on Pro Presenter, plugging in cables and doing all these things that we forget to minister to the Lord.
Right.
And that's so important. In fact, if you look later on in the Old Testament, you get the priests of Zadok. They were like the only ones at that time who had continued to be faithful to minister to God. And so everybody else was removed from the temple.
Yeah.
It's so amazing that only those who ministered to the Lord got to stay in his presence. So carry his presence, minister to the Lord, and pronounce blessings in his name. And I think those 3 things will be a good guideline when you're choosing set lists, when you're auditioning, when you're practicing, and when you're just worshiping, whether you have an acoustic or a full band. If you hit those 3 things, I think you'd be all right. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I think that should be your next book, by the way. Talking about Levites and priests of Zadok. And speaking of, go check out Kurtis's book, Sound Check. Hey. And Kurtis, before we go, tell everybody where we can find you, where we can find Sound Check, your music, all of that.
Absolutely, yeah. KurtisParks.com, Kurtis with a K.
Right.
So if you go on there, you'll find links to my music. I just put out a Christmas record.
Yes.
So been excited to put that out for a while. So, but yeah, on Spotify, of course, social media with Instagram and Facebook. I love to connect with folks.
Yeah.
So you can find everything at KurtisParks.com.
Awesome. Yeah, go connect with Kurtis. I've learned so much from you, man. And I was thinking this morning, I think collectively out of all my time in ministry, I've worked with you longer than anybody else. So,
and we're still friends.
And we're still friends for now. So, no, it's been a blast. Grateful for you, man. Thanks for coming on.